I'm taking notes, so I've already got a page of notes of things I'm going to steal. So
we'll
let me acknowledge that. And the one thing I like very simple mental images that I can keep. And I love what Ashley was just talking about it's not feedback, it's not insights. Can a leader have a positive conversation with her or his employees? When an employee leaves an interaction with a leader, do they leave feeling better or worse about themselves?
Maybe starting with you, Adelaide, get straight into it, if that's okay. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. And also this whole employee experience topic. How is that showing up for you currently in your practical kind of experience from AXA, but also elsewhere? And where do you see it going next? I mean, Dave has charted some really interesting thoughts about where it's going, and maybe influenced by COVID, and also everything that it's built on. But what do you think? Where do you see it going next from your experience?
Sure, I think it is definitely the topic at the moment, and please let me know if you're struggling to hear me, because I've actually brought another device, so you're okay. Okay. I think this year has created a great opportunity for us in terms of employee experience and to really take it to the next level. For me, employee experience is really every touch point we have with the employee, and it's the first time I think that HR is getting it right. Instead of focusing only on one element, we're focusing on all of it. And we're approaching our employees in the same way that we would approach our customers, where we say it's a journey, it's a full-on journey, every element matters to us, and every interaction that we have with you should be something that is to your liking, that will drive the business in the end of the day. And I think taking the context of this year, where we really see it going is in a new direction, because we do have COVID this year, but we've also had a lot of other events. We've had events such as Black Lives Matters, which changes the way we look at D&I in our workplace and the way we look at inclusion and the way we interact with our employees. We've got a whole new scope of technology. So I think a key focus will be how are we going to use tools to implement our employee experience. Most companies now are looking at, are we going to work from home more often? Are we going to work from home full time? And how do you keep that connection with people? And I think there was a really good quote that I'd like to recap. The compelling human experience is what the employee experience really is about. It's about how we get our employees from not only working for us, but truly believing in the company. And I think just like all other companies, AXA is still on a journey, and it will be a journey that will take us years. I don't think this journey will ever end. I don't think we're going to say we've nailed employee experience, because as everything changes in our environment, so will our employee experience. So I'm very excited to look at how we can really dive into what Dave also said and discuss how we can encourage believing, becoming, and really belonging to an organization in the future.
It's really interesting, because I know from the areas of your work that you particularly concentrate on, I was struck because maybe you could elaborate on those, the feedback side and the leadership side, because what struck me from Dave's talk too was, and also the theme of this whole conference has been the emotional piece, the emotional connection piece, the empathy, the human dimension, right? And one of the things I suppose I've noticed in the employee experience agenda over the last number of years is it's more rather than emotional, it's been more rational. It's been more about, let's make this the best office that we can. Let's create all the bits and pieces. Let's our pay and conditions of benefits, and even the ways of working and the flexibility on work, the terms, the conditions, the physical, the work side itself. All stuff that you could argue is sort of above the surface. It's kind of like surface level, and the rational side. Let's make this, and we're going to compete with next door as well to make sure we have snazzier this and nice. Whereas what's coming through loud and clear is actually the emotional piece. Well, two things from Dave, I suppose: the connection to the business, and the connection in terms of the human piece. And I'm just wondering, of all the possible initiatives and areas you could choose to focus on for employee experience, what are some of your priorities with that in mind?
Sure. I think some of the priorities for us is looking at the way we approach leadership. So today, when we talk about leadership, what comes to mind is your top 30 people, your top 50 people, your top 300 people, depending on the size of your organization. But I think the way we want to approach leadership should change and is changing. And that is in the sense that every employee should feel an element of leadership. They should feel that they own a part of the company. They have the responsibility and they are an expert in something. So in other words, I want people to come to me and say, with your knowledge of HR, what do you think? And I feel that today on the ground, not all our employees have that experience. So to build on every individual, not only owning their career, but also owning a level of expertise so that they can say, I am the leader in this field, and therefore I drive the business on what I know. So I think for us, that's a key element to change the way we approach leadership, for it to be a more universal discussion within the company rather than being a set of 10, 15, 20 people that are seen as experts. And I know we also spoke about feedback, and you mentioned that. Feedback for us is a key, and I think the reason because is that feedback truly is where we can use it as a catalyst to get the personal connection between individuals, and especially going in a virtual world that we are today, it's really key for us to keep that connection. And feedback is a way to build trust. It's the best way for us to be able to start building a relationship where it's not just about, hi, how are you? How was your weekend? But it actually dives into work, and it dives into a continuous learning cycle where an employee can give feedback to their manager and therefore learn from them. And that again comes back to that leadership element. So I think these two elements really support each other, and is what we're really going to focus on in the future in terms of changing the way we work today and moving into an environment where it's really the full ecosystem of an employee experience that drives business rather than just a process. So it's no longer about year-end review or no longer about our employee engagement survey, but it's the entire journey throughout.
Yeah, I just was really struck by that there happened to be the two areas where you were picking, which were really going to serve that emotional connection piece, because it was, even though you've got how many tens of thousands of people around, and we have to get processes right, and global processes, we have to get systems, we have to get the workplace okay. But actually you were focusing on the very pieces of talent development, and which were very much person to person type of priorities. Aisling, I turn to you. Maybe just the same question. I think people got a lovely introduction to you there from your impro discussion with Dave there. But anything else you'd like to mention on about your role or Tandem? But same idea, I guess, is just for everybody on the call to get the benefit of your experience as to how you're seeing the employee experience topic show up right now, and also where you see it kind of going, and what people are doing about it.
Yeah. So I think in Tandem, what we've seen is a big shift this year, and we've changed even the way that we look at employee experience this year. We started our life in a very different form, as you know, focusing on feedback. But then we took on a much broader remit, because we were like, well, in this world of dispersed teams, in this world where people have to be managed remotely, how do we manage them in that way? Because how do you have like a performance management conversation over Teams or Zoom, and how can you check in with people and make that comfortable? And how do we get people to have experiences that they might have naturally had? Because in office spaces, you have a lot of validation that comes to you indirectly. Even your boss smiling at you at a meeting, or having a quick chat in the coffee corner, you're okay, you're doing good, because otherwise he wouldn't have smiled so nicely at you. Whereas now we have to almost artificially create these moments for people to have those relationships. So we've been helping clients to craft the employee experience end to end for their organization, but in a way that's unique to their culture. Because I think the danger is that we all decide, this is it, it's all CPM now, and everybody just needs to have check-ins monthly and, performance discussions quarterly, and we start to create these cadences that are consistent for every single organization. I'm not convinced of that. I think that we need to be very clear about where an organization is and the maturity of that organization, and come up with a cadence and a structure that's really right for that culture. But we do have to create it, and of course we bring it to life through technology. But we really see, and particularly this year, it's been more evident than ever, that technology can drive an action. in a way that employee experience maybe couldn't in the past. So give you a simple thing. One of the things we came up with this year for a subset of our clients was something really simple, like Feedback Fridays. And we would send a nudge to our client base going, hey, it's Friday, give someone on your team feedback, and created this lovely viral experience. But we noticed for the clients who didn't nudge, they didn't get the same usage in Tandem, you know? So you kind of have to drive the action and create this artificial moment that people kind of engage and go, oh, okay, it's time to give feedback. And then you get the feel-good factor of people, peers to peers, recognizing each other, people feeling that sense of community and belonging again, and really, you know, appreciating each other, which you needed more this year than ever. So I think employee experience has moved on a lot, not just because people are embracing technology and so on, but because now we can measure every element of the employee experience and exactly what's happening. So I think in the past, as Adelaide referred to, you know, a lot of people relied on engagement surveys as the only form of measuring, you know, the experience. But now you can craft a whole experience and go, okay, we can, you know, how often are managers checking in with their people, but not just how often, what's the quality of those check-ins? What are they talking about? What's coming out of that as a result? And what should we do in HR to help? What sort of growth and learning interventions do we need? So we see people doing 360s more and more, helping people grow and develop, because there's this massive surge and appetite for growth and development right now. So people are democratizing that 360 experience and bringing it down the line. So we can measure all these different areas of literally from the point that a person joins the company right through exactly measuring the experience that they have at every single point. And I think that's so powerful, because we're not sitting around waiting for a survey to tell us whether they're happy or not, or whether they're growing or not. We know already what's going on at any point.
Because what I'm going to bring Dave back in a minute here, but one thing he was saying was that, you know, in all of the, you know, getting the positioning of employee experience right through that customer connection and the business connection, etc., then getting the emphasis right, you know, the 3 Bs, you know, it being a human thing and the emotional connection. But he also said about the importance, though, of having it, you know, that it needs to be systemized as well. It needs to be deliberate and technology enabled. And it strikes me that that's something that you're obviously providing. And but the other thing I'm struck by your approach to is you talk about shaping culture for an agile world. In other words, it's not just about the technology. The culture needs to be right for this. In other words, that the feedback, Dave talked about the growth mindset, for instance, that the feedback, it's in a trusting environment. In other words, feedback isn't part of some kind of like devious performance management agenda in the background, or that it's actually positively orientated, growth orientated, genuine, authentic, positively, like we have your back type of idea, rather than, oh, we're measuring you, you know. And do you find that that's still a kind of a tension, or do you think maybe COVID might have helped us to move on from that, and that using technology for these moments that you talk about right through the day, do you think technology be trusted more as a place where I can share that information?
Yeah, I think people definitely have embraced technology an awful lot more this year, and they're getting more and more comfortable with it, and they're allowing it to use it for good, you know. So I think, you know, feedback is no good unless we trust the intent behind it.
Exactly.
You know, if we think this is going to be there to catch us out, or actually they're really kind of having a go, you know, the backhanded compliments, like, then we don't trust it, right? But I think if we get into a culture and a habit of using technology to trigger us, and we frame it and we go, okay, we're looking for feedback on this specifically. And that's been a journey for us to learn as well, that, you know, actually just asking people to give each other feedback isn't the answer, and it doesn't really help. But asking people to be very specific about feedback on what and for what purpose, then it really does help. And there's a great piece of research out from Tamara Chandler and Laura Grealish, and they talk a lot about how you need to be very clear about the context with people. So even something as simple as one-to-ones or check-ins, you know, they talked about things like you need to split regular check-ins from performance check-ins, because the employees now need to feel safe. You know, we are all suffering a certain element of professional isolation. We don't have that in-office validation that we had, so we don't know what's really going on. So we need to be very clear that we're here to talk about these things today. This is a regular check-in. We're here to connect as human beings, see how you are, see what kind of progress you're making, versus I'm here to talk to you about your performance. So I think this is one of the things that HR need to get kind of very deep into, which is let's craft the experience. What are we using feedback for? What are we using our one-to-ones and our check-ins for? Excuse me. And what kind of conversations are we having in performance management? Because we have to reshape these processes. What we did before doesn't work anymore. So when we reshape them, I think we have to give really strong tools to our managers so that they go in knowing what they're supposed to discuss, knowing what the agenda is, and the employees very clear about what's going on here as well, and is not waiting to be caught out or surprised.
Yeah, and it's been framed in a growth orientation rather than a performance orientation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Dave, you've been very patient there. I'm going to turn to some of the questions on the chat. But do you want to kind of respond or circle back with Adelaide or Aisling on anything you heard there? Just yourself, I'm sure
the best response is amen and amen. Great insights. The one thing I might want to reinforce, I really love, Adelaide, your comments about leadership is distributed, not hierarchy. It's not about a role. It's about a distributed action. I love the 3 B's. Are you as a leader, self-question, am I as a leader helping people believe better? Leader, you're a meaning maker. Am I helping people become better? Am I using my strengths to strengthen you? Am I using my power to empower you? Am I helping you to feel a sense of belonging? Am I making sure that you know that I care? I mean, I think those 3 elements of a distributed leadership are so powerful. And I'm saying, I adore your work on, it's not feedback, it's feed forward. And I mean, people play games with words. You're not saying go in and criticize people. You've never said that. I mean, I think people create a straw man out of, they do it for me as well. They create a straw man to make a very good point. I think your work about helping through performance management is not about the process, setting goals, giving standards. It's about the conversation. And the work that you've done with Tandem and others is just so good about creating positive conversations. So, Kevin, those are my amen and amen with too many comments.
Great. Well, yeah, it would have helped the dynamic. It's helped the dynamic that you didn't, say that everything was rubbish there. So that's good. Thank you for that. But no, really good, because I just get to see that connection, your point about the human side, and then the areas of emphasis that Adelaide is talking about. And then from a technology provider point of view, Aisling's talking about how do you make the technology a safe, positive, growth-orientated place to go. So there's a real common golden thread, I think, around this. There's a couple of questions. One actually from Crystal Ergo, just kind of quizzing that point, Dave. Understand that a general employee experience must happen so that our customer satisfaction increases. But specifically on well-being, shouldn't we be caring, particularly about our employees' well-being? Because they're human beings, and just for that human connection, and then the customer experience will follow. So I suppose it's just looking for.
Could I change one word?
Yeah.
Instead of saying employee well-being, say people well-being. Mm-hmm. And the minute I say we should care about people well-being, guess what? Our employees are people, and our customers are people.
It's not either or.
And so bridging the two. This isn't about employee well-being versus customer well-being. It's about people well-being. Our products and our services at AXA, our products and services at Tandem. Yeah, we want to create well-being with our customers. They're people. Wayne Brockbank taught me that this week. He said, Dave, everybody separates employees and customers. They're all people. How do we get people connecting with each other? And that creates, to the great question, a virtuous cycle. When we can see the value of A leading to B, and I don't know where you start with the people as customers or people as employees, and you see the connection, that creates a spiral that builds on itself. And we have loyalty. There are some folks I've worked with as a consultant, as an employee in some ways for them. They're now my friends. And there's actually somebody who set up this call who is now my friend. And I know that he considers me a friend. And if I were struggling, I would, again, technology enables relationships. I don't think it's technology or person to person. But if that friend were to send me that email at 3:00 this afternoon and say, Dave, I'm struggling with something, and I'll get emotional, I'd be back within an hour if I could. I mean, again, being realistic. But technology enables an access to relationships that we never had before. we've never had before. And it's so exciting to see that.
And Adelaide, you might have noticed, I think it's a related point coming in from Claire. Hi, Claire. That the tools maybe that we've used for this connection and 360 and feedback and mentoring other talent levers that we've used to drive a sense of leadership throughout the organization. These levers were all limited in the past to a small subset of the organization. But how do we extend them to develop a feeling of belonging and connection right throughout the organization? And maybe it's systems like Tandem able to create that sort of democratized conversation rather than HR like top-down process. Now you only give the feedback if you've got the email and the link. That actually there's something more democratized. But what's your own experience of that or plans for that in terms of, especially in a big multinational organization? How do you create that belonging and feedback and discussion?
I think the first step where we started, and this is something that has gone really well, is to move away from leadership training, and especially in an online forum, being exclusively for leaders. I know when I joined organizations in the past, you had to be a certain level to access specific learning because that was reserved and kind of on an elite squad, which it isn't anymore today. And at AXA, it's available to everyone, for everyone at any time. And I think that's really changed the way we learn. And it's also created a feeling for employees that they have access to become greater leaders in the future. I think when it comes to tools like 360, which I believe is an amazing tool for employees to be able to get feedback, it is to look at a 360 that is applicable for every level of your organization, not necessarily focusing specifically on, let's say, more complex structures such as strategic thinking or recruiting the right people, but also really focusing on day-to-day activities that applies to everyone. So when we come to AXA, we've really focused on what we call our commitments, which is pretty much explaining our values and what we believe in a company and what we're striving to be as a company, and to incorporate them into an element such as a 360 rather than focusing only on traditional leadership skills, if I can call it that, to drive a 360 questionnaire. I think there is still work to be done in terms of making that technology available to everyone, especially in a company such as AXA, where you've got 60 countries, you've got different legislation, different complexities in each of the countries. And that is where employee experience does link back to processes and making those processes simple enough or available enough for the masses. And I think that is really something that's going to be a working point for us for many years to come. Given the current climate this year, I think we've made strides in terms of technology being available, and it's very impressive to see how quickly the world has adapted. And I do think that opens the door for us in future to use that technology on a larger scale across the board, because in the end, we do want a system that really supports an easy employee experience for that specific element.
Yeah, no, so I see Magali there has also come in with a point about feedback, Aisling, that you might have seen in the chat. But maybe to close out on that, because it feels to me that feedback, feed forward, as beautifully said. I mean, I love that phrase. The only performance you can impact is future performance. You can learn. Yeah. You can learn from the past, but in terms of performance discussions, it's all about the forward piece and the growth idea, the authenticity, the emotional connection. It feels to me that feedback is kind of one of these big, battlegrounds, if you like, that we're going to need to address, because maybe it carries some baggage from the old world, if we want to call it. So maybe we've covered it enough, Aisling and Dave, but any final points you'd make about the future of feedback that we haven't made already? Because it feels like it's going to be an important one, because we know, don't we, as well, in terms of increased complexity and agility, one of the things in dealing with complexity, that there is lots of alternatives and options. So there's going to be conflict. There's going to be creative tension, creating solutions and business plans, etc., going forward. So therefore, an openness of dialogue and feedback is essential for us to have progress and for us not to be carrying grudges and to keep things going. So cracking feedback and dialogue for me seems like a really important area for HR to figure out how to address. Any last comments on that?
I think to get to Magali's question, I think there's some really interesting concepts emerging around this, because one of the things that we learned in the early days of feedback is that, you know, in the early days, we just provided a tool, and it was a tool to make feedback easy. And then we'd sit there and go, why isn't anyone using the tool? Like, it's a great tool and everybody loved it when they got it. But what you have to drive is a trigger, you know, a trigger into getting people to use a tool and then reward them for that behavior. Because anytime you're trying to form a new habit around that, you need triggers and rewards. And it's all about how you frame feedback. You know, we were working with one client and they hated the word feedback. So, but they wanted people to get into the habit of requesting feedback from each other. Because sometimes when you request feedback, it's a bit easier, because now I've given you a license to give me feedback. But instead of saying, let's request feedback, they were like, let's ask for advice. You know, so simple things like you relabel the tool not to be feedback, you put advice. And so you can, you know, you can reframe, if the word feedback is a dirty word in your organization, you can reframe it. And there's lots of fun ideas kind of emerged about that. And there's some great books in and around this topic. But I do think that we have to create employee experiences that embrace feedback, because people are sitting behind a Teams call, they're not getting their usual validation. That we do need to create those channels. And it's not just feedback in its own right, it's different forms. It's how do we check in with our people? How do we make sure that they're doing okay? And that comes in every form of the employee experience. So it comes from feedback, it comes from check-ins, it comes from how we cascade goals, how we deliver team goals, how we manage performance, how we pulse survey. So this is the whole kind of gambit, and this is really what we double down on this year in Tandem, is providing that whole gambit in a very consistent way. But what we really have to think about is, how do we slice and dice that for the organization? Because that might be nice for head office to do monthly one-to-ones, but maybe it's not great for retail or for customer care. So maybe you need slightly different cadence and orchestration to your employee experience in different parts of the organization. And that's the beauty of tech, of course, that you can be flexible and create different experiences for different parts of your organization, and really segment the customer journey from an employee experience perspective. So there's some really nice work you can do on mapping out your employee journey and looking at the experience from different perspectives.
I think Sandor has really added to your point there about language, saying from GE that they've started to use the term insights rather than feedback. So I'm giving you insights, or I'm giving you advice. But again, it's growth orientated. It's for the future. It's not about trying to criticize the past. Or Dave, any before we move slightly to the sort of last question, any other thoughts?
I love, again, amen and amen, both great on distributed leadership and what we do. I'm taking notes, so I've already got a page of notes of things I'm going to steal. So
we'll
let me acknowledge that. And the one thing I like very simple mental images that I can keep. And I love what Ashley was just talking about it's not feedback, it's not insights. Can a leader have a positive conversation with his employees? When an employee leaves an interaction with a leader, do they leave feeling better or worse about themselves? I've challenged leaders to do that, both virtually as well as in person. Sometimes it's easy. I mean, this is easy. I think the insights, Kevin, that you're drawing from us and that Adelaide and Ashley are sharing, it's easy. You guys are great, I can tell you. But even when it's a difficult discussion, can a leader learn so that when the employee leaves that interaction, and in my head as a leader, that's the believe, become, belong stuff, am I making sure that employee feels better about him or herself as a result of this feedback, insight, conversation, whatever you want to call it? I've tried to coach leaders to do it, and they've said, Dave, give me a recipe. And I go, I don't know how. Get a hold of Ashling. No, I mean, it's not easy. But if you have in your mind as an HR person coaching a leader, or as a leader doing conversations on difficult topics. I'll give one example, and this is an extreme, but it's good. I knew the leader, I knew the setting, and she was going to have to let somebody go. This was during the pandemic, whether it's virtual or in person, and I challenged her. And I knew she was having the conversation. The person she let go called me 2 hours later, whom I knew, and said, I just had a great discussion with my boss. And I thought, oh my gosh, how did that go? And he said, I feel really good. I said, tell me about it. Here's what he said. I walked in, my boss looked at me and said, I care about you. I care about you. I care about your family. I care about the work you're doing. I can tell things aren't going very well for you, and it must feel bad for you in this new world. I want to help you find a place that allows you to maximize your gifts and your talents. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make that happen. How do you feel about that? And he said, I stopped and I thought, yeah, she's right. It's not working for me or for her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he said, I left feeling like, yeah. He called me a month later. She helped him find another job in another company.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I get goosebumpy at that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that easy. But when we can make that happen, that's so cool, because he left feeling better and she left relieved. But anyway, so that's that's a quick example.
Yeah, no, wonderful. It's not. John Collard talks about, such decades of leadership on change, and just talks about, the vast majority of change programs and personal change and organizational change fail because of the emphasis on the head rather than on the mind rather than the heart. So, that we focused on the programmatic and the logic of the change and driving the change through, but we haven't stopped to take account of the human connection piece that you just described there. And actually the extent to which change programs have succeeded, the data is compelling that it's when that time was taken to connect with individuals, to make sense of the change for them in their personal lives and why it would be of benefit, personal benefit to them, not benefit just for the company, but personal benefit for them and the growth. That's when you got the commitment, the purpose, the belonging, the belief, everything kind of just fell in. But it had to be.
I'm going to be I won't be, don't ask me another question because I'll talk too much. I got to share one other quick example. I'm coaching a great business leader who tends to be abrupt and aggressive. And an employee made a mistake 2 weeks ago. There was millions of dollars of mistake. I got the business leader, and I'm saying this so that HR people can do it as you coach. Let me see the email before you send it. And he said, why? And I said, trust me. He sent me the email, and it said, in that meeting, you made a horrible mistake. It's going to cost us millions. You hurt the company. You need to do this. And I said, may I change it? And he said, what would you change? I said, before the statement, you made a mistake, write the following. I care about you. You have great potential in this company. For you to live up to your potential, you need to learn from the things that have worked and not worked. In this case, you made a mistake. It cost us millions. That preamble changed the entire relationship. He called me a week later and he said, Dave, I can't believe it. He called me and thanked me. And I said, that's why I'm coaching you. But Kevin, I love what all of us are saying is if we can respond to people in a human way, we still have to give difficult conversations. I'm not afraid of that. I think that's a reality. I mean, but anyway, that's it. I think that little example of so powerful that it captured what we can get. So I'll stop and not intrude on these great comments.
No problem. And I'm really, I am conscious of time. I'm about 5 minutes over the original. And if people need to go, and Dave, if you need to go, please don't feel absolutely fine about that. Because certainly, I think a couple of us, maybe Aisling, we'd be happy to, don't know about you, Adelaide, happy to stay on for the 5 or 10 minutes, but let people go if they need to, no problem. But maybe to close out the formal piece of this, is there what one thing would you say in terms of the employee experience going forward, particularly with the kind of COVID experience and everything that we've had, and this kind of very human, empathetic, authentic kind of wave that we seem to be on, thankfully. But what one thing do you really see differently about the approach to employee experience that maybe we just have never seen before, or haven't seen before as much? What do you think is going to go top to the agenda regarding the employee experience strategy or agenda? You better make it one of those 12 things from Dave's side, by the way. But no, what for you would be the compelling thing that you see is really going to be a big emphasis? I mean, you may have said it already, but just for people to take away the one thing. Aisling, do you want to go first, and then Adelaide?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it's end to end. I think it's the way we manage people. So I do think performance management is getting a shake-up. I know everybody every year says performance management is getting a shake-up, but this year more than ever, because I think most people's performance management does not fit the new world. Smart annual objectives, forget about it. In a year of COVID, they have changed goals so many times and reprioritized them so many times that if you're not working in an agile goal mindset, then you probably have a big problem. The way we check in with people, the way, you know, what we talk about. I think the biggest change this year is that HR recognized that they are capable of crafting an employee experience that suits the environment. And they're not afraid to throw out the processes and the original assumptions that we made. And we can't forget that most people are still working with a performance management system that comes from assumptions that were made in the 70s. You know, and the working world has transformed so dramatically since the 70s that of course it can't make sense for the 2020s and the decade ahead of us. So I do think, you know, the way we manage performance is fundamentally new, it's different, it's refreshed, and it's a comfortable experience. It's exactly what Dave's saying. We can navigate leaders to be more caring, to be more human, and to provide comfortable experiences where we can still talk about the tough stuff and we can still reinforce accountability, but we can do it in a way that's much fresher and much more human, and technology can really help us. And I think they're the biggest changes for me. I think that's it, top of the list.
What a really visible statement of intent towards a positive. If people were to say, actually, this is the way we did performance management, which everybody hates, and now we're acknowledging that this is now needs a refresh, and that's going to be a part of our new reset. It'll be a very powerful message, I think.
It's an easy win because it's such a symbolic anchor of culture change. Yeah.
Adelaide, almost the last word to you.
Yeah, I'm going to go in a bit of a different direction in terms of moving away from a process, because I think what we've learned as an organization here is truly, I can summarize it in one word, and that is connect. And I think that really goes close to what Dave said, so not one of his 12, but one of his 3, in the sense of belonging. I think something that we have started doing that we never used to do because companies are so business-minded is we've started having meetings with no agenda, where the aim is purely to have a conversation with someone, and that might lead back to work, or it might lead to something personal. And I'll give a personal example today. We had a team call, and the first thing I did is I picked up a puppy because my dog had puppies yesterday, and I said, look, this is my puppy. And we spent 15 minutes talking about puppies rather than about work. And I think that is such a great way for people to feel like they're belonging. They feel like they're in a community now rather than at a job. And I think that is truly a change that we've seen throughout COVID, where people have made an extra effort to get to know people who they maybe have sat next to for the last year, 2 years, 5 years at work. And all of a sudden, people are lonely. And I think the more we work in this mode, the more we work remotely, the more likely that is to happen, that we lose that connection. And it's great to see that most managers, but also most employees have gone the extra mile to rather build a stronger connection than to lose what we've already had. And I think that's something for us that will remain key post-COVID. To say, let's have a meeting. It only needs to be 15, 20 minutes, but let's have no agenda. And whichever topic flows first is the key topic for us. And it might not be work-related.
Purely about that connection. And that connection that brings people closer then to that believe, become, and belong agenda too, Dave. Correct, you know, in terms of just getting. I think it's incredible. We've been having this discussion now for some time, and we haven't talked about foosball tables or the fancy office or the terms and conditions or new benefits or anything. It's all been about how we win that connection, you know, battle. Dave, any last moments to you, and then we let people away. And I think it's testament to all 3 of you that people have hung on here in the conversation, but I do want to let people go. But maybe Dave, last word to you, and then I'll hand back to Thomas.
3 phrases. 1, amen, 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 all 3 amens. 2, work matters. And I think that's, Kevin, in deference to your great work. And 3rd, remember that this entire discussion should enable our organization to succeed in the marketplace. That without success in the marketplace with customers, communities, and investors, this stuff just doesn't happen. And I hope that mindset and the guidance, I'm just going to reinforce that 3rd bullet that I talked about in the broad session. We can guide that action. I think that moves HR to a completely different place.